Perfect. Hi everyone, thanks for joining our sessions. My name is Louise Keane. I'm a performance GDA with Sligo GAA, and I'm going to take us through this session. So what we're going to look at is strength and conditioning for youth players. So the aim for this workshop, what I'm hoping you'll take out of it, is as coaches to learn what exercises you can implement with your youth players. Then with those exercises, how they can be integrated into your pitch sessions, but also how you can use them away from the pitch. So how they can be used through lockdown and even when we're back in normal times, back on the pitch, how they can be used still away from the pitch. Okay, so hopefully you'll get some practical applications that you can take out of this session and bring straight into your sessions pretty quickly. So just before we get into it, I think it's important to take a look at, I suppose, the bigger picture side of things. So athletic development or strength and conditioning is just one component of what we're doing. So we have all the other elements, skills of the game, nutrition, your tactics and your systems, your analysis and participant feedback, and your psychological focus, the physiotherapy element of things as well. So there's a lot of things going on. It's important that we recognize athletic development is only one part of that and look at ways that we can integrate it into our sessions as best as possible. So what are we talking about? What are we looking at when we talk about strength and conditioning, when we talk about athletic development or long-term athletic development? Okay, so many different terms out there for it, but whichever one you choose, what we're looking at really is the habitual development of athleticism over time. Okay, so we're trying to improve health and fitness, we're trying to enhance physical performance, we're trying to reduce the relative risk of injuries, and we're looking to develop the confidence and competence of all youth. Okay, the education side of things is really, really important as well. So we want our players to learn how and why various types of strength and conditioning are important to prepare them for physical and psychological demands of a lifetime of sport and physical activity. So important that they're learning how and why, so that when they finish playing at whatever age that might be, hopefully a long time down the line, that they still know how to do things, they still know why they're doing these different things, so that they're physically active for their whole life and not just for sport. So within athletic development, so there's many different components. Just like we look at our overall sessions, there's many different elements that we look at. So for athletic development, we obviously have our strength side of things, we have our conditioning side of things, but there's also other things that are going on. So speed, agility and change of direction, power, mobility, plyometrics. Okay, so there's a lot of different things, some things that we can work and train together, and other things that tend to happen a little bit more in isolation. Okay, so what we're going to focus on in this session is strength and plyometrics. Okay, so we're going to take a look at both of those and give you things that you can do to use with your teams. Okay, so we'll take strength first. Within our strength side, what we're looking to do, so a lot of the times when we think of strength, we think of weights, we think of the gym, but there's a lot more to it than that, okay? And we can absolutely do it without both of those things, okay? So what we're looking at first is teaching technique, okay? So we want our players to move, first of all, like a person, okay? We want them to move like a human being, and then we progress that on to moving like an athlete, and then we progress further to moving like a Gaelic athlete. Okay, so it's really starting at the start and making sure we're not jumping steps. Okay, so we're focusing on technique, we're teaching these movement patterns and making sure that our players are effective in them and that they're efficient in those movement patterns. So by doing that, by looking at our technique, by building strength, what we're doing is building force production and force absorption. So we're helping them to be able to produce force and get strong, but also to be able to take those loads that they're eventually going to work towards. Okay, we're building mobility and stability through the movements. We're learning postural control. We'll be gaining balance. By doing all these things and learning these different things, we'll be reducing the risk of injury, and we'll also be developing robust players. Okay, so we're teaching them first to move general movement patterns, to move like a person. Then as they get really good at that, as they get really good at their technique, we'll start progressing that on and increasing load, increasing resistance. So whatever way that might be weight, that might be resistance bands, it might be adding tempo to our exercises. Okay, but we're challenging them through the movement patterns with load and with added stress on their body. Okay, and then we move to moving like a specific athlete, so like a Gaelic player in this instance, and we're moving more speed, more power into the exercises. So we're starting with technique, we're building strength, and then we're moving into power. Okay, so that's an overall kind of look at strength and what we're looking to do, and the movement patterns that we're going to look at and that we focus on here in Sligo are the squat movements, the hip hinge, the push and the pull, the carry, and the core. So we're going to go through some movement patterns within these categories. So if you think of a squat, there's many different types of squat movements. The same with hip hinges, the same with pushes and pulls, and the same with carry and core. The only one we won't really look at today is the carry one. So everything we're kind of going to look at today is body weight and how we can work with body weight and how we can challenge our players with that. Not adding resistance in means we're not going to have carrying type of movements, but we'll look at all the rest. Okay, so we'll go through our squat, hip hinge, push pull, and our core. So what we have here, this is what we use in Sligo. So we have two different slides on this. Okay, so we'll start off just with this one here. So we have different levels of movement. So our green is our level 1, our yellow is our level 2, and our red or orange is our level 3. Okay, so this is a way that we use to progress our exercises with our players through our development squads and also through our regional development program with the club player. Okay, so if you take a look at the squat, so our first one here, we have the squat at level 1, it's a split squat. At level 2, it's a goblet squat. And at level 3, it's an overhead squat. So it gives us really simple progressions that we can use with our players. We can start them at level 1, make sure that they're strong in those movement patterns, that they're really efficient in them, that their technique is really, really good. And then we can step them up onto a goblet squat. The exact same again, we focus on our technique, make sure they're good in terms of their movement pattern, and then progress again onto our overhead squat. Okay, so it's the same with each exercise. So we have lunges in there, starting with a forward lunge, using a walking lunge, and using a reverse lunge. Okay, and we progress through the different movement patterns that we have. So our hip hinge then starts off with a stiff leg deadlift. Okay, so our bilateral kind of RDL. So 2 feet hinging at the hip, and we're teaching that movement pattern. Then into our single leg RDL, and then we're progressing that again by adding a cone into the single RDL. So we're challenging them through an extra movement. Okay, our push-ups as well. So we have a front elevated push-up, which means that they're pushing off a box or off a step. Their normal push-up, and then progressing that by elevating our feet with a rear elevated push-up. Okay, so it's starting off really, really simple with the exercise and progressing through the different levels to challenge them, but making sure that they're learning their technique. So all the exercises here, bar our seated row, our pull exercise. So for our pull, we have our seated row, our standing quarter squat row, and our bent over row. So that's the only one where we have a resistance in it. Our pull, we need to have a little bit of added resistance as opposed to just body weight for our pull to be able to get for that to be effective. But it's very, very light resistance, just working with a band. Okay, once they're really good at these movement patterns, then we can start looking at weight, but we can get really, really good bang for our buck by teaching these movement patterns and getting them really, really strong in those movement patterns so that their technique is really, really good. Okay, we can get a lot out of that, probably more than we think. Okay, so there's quite a few different exercises there. We have assistance exercises there as well. So they're kind of add-ons to our main movement patterns. Okay, so if you look at our bird dog ones are up first. So they're starting by just moving their hands. Then their second level is for just moving their feet. And then their their full bird dog is moving the opposite hand and opposite foot. Okay, I have written in there as well, cone on the back. So that's just to keep that stability so that they're not getting too much movement through their hips. And we also have glute bridge there as well. So we're working off a normal glute bridge. We're working then into a glute bridge on their heels and then into a single leg glute bridge. Okay. Then we have a couple more assistance exercises. So we have a crawl and a get up. So for the bear crawl, it starts off with just a normal crawl, okay? And they're moving in that crawl position. So that means their knees are on the ground for this one. Again, placing a cone on their back so that we're trying to limit that movement through their hips. We progress that by going into a bear crawl and just moving forward and back. So to go from a crawl to a bear crawl, we're just lifting the knees slightly up off the ground, okay, and we're moving forward and back through that movement, and then adding in different movements, okay, for our level 3. So we're not just going in a straight line, we might be moving side to side, we might be going in a curve or a zigzag, okay, to add challenge to that. And then for our get-ups, so we're starting off, so for our get-ups, we start standing. Okay, we use a cone on the palm of our hand. We have to get down to lying down on the ground and then standing back up without that cone falling off. So we can still use that with our players away from the pitch, so they don't need to have a cone. They can use a ball or a book or whatever they have at home. And to make it more challenging into our second level, all we're doing is putting the cone on the back of their hand. So they're flipping their hand over and putting it on the back of their hand and trying that one again. And then the last level there then is the get up with the shoe. So they're making a fist. They're placing the bottom of their shoe, the sole of their shoe on their fist, and they're trying to get up to standing and then back down to lying down without letting that shoe fall off. So it's a lot more challenging than it looks, okay? And then we finish off with our core. So again, our 3 levels. So we're looking at our plank and our dead bug. So for our plank, we can start off with a front elevated plank. So their hands are raised, whether you're using a bench or a chair or a step, whatever it might be. Then our regular plank. And then we've got our plank with change in limb position. So we might be stretching out a hand or lifting a foot or doing both or moving through a movement. So we might be getting them to push up to a high plank position and then drop back down. Okay, and then our dead bug. So we've got a dead bug brace. Okay, so we're lying on our back for that one. And what you're going to do is take the opposite hand and opposite knee, and you're going to push the two of them into each other. So you're pushing your knee towards your face, and you're pushing your hand towards your foot. Okay, and you're resisting both the push from either side. Okay, so we're getting a brace through that dead bug. Then for our second level, it's a half dead bug. So from that start position of the hands being straight up and the knees brought in, you're stretching out the opposite hand and opposite leg. You're going to bring them back in, hold for a second, and go out again on the opposite side. And then our full dead bug is moving both hands and feet at the same time. So you're stretching your hands up so that you're effectively forming it into a straight line without letting your feet and your hands touch the ground and coming back to center. There's a lot of exercises in that. But hopefully, you know, they're all fairly simple and all things that you'll be able to use. And I'm going to go through ways and how we can use them now. With these exercises, if you're unsure of any, we have videos for all of them over on our Sligo GAA Coaching and Games YouTube channel as well. So there is videos there that you can use and look at, and that, you know, if you're using them with your players, that they can be sent out to players as well. Okay, so there's a lot in it. There's a lot of exercises there, but we'll be able to use them through programs, through our pitch sessions, and we'll go through that now. Okay, so how can we implement these exercises? So we've 3 kind of key areas or key ways we can use them, but you know, there's more to it as well. So what we're going to look at is part of a program. Okay, so we can implement them through programs. We can implement them through exercise challenges. So whether that's, you know, sending them home with homework, or whether it's giving them challenges each week now as we're in lockdown. And also then integrating these movement patterns into our warm-ups. So that's another way that we spoke earlier about making sure we can integrate our athletic development into our sessions. So we're going to look at how we can do that through our warm-ups as well. Okay, so we'll take our programs first. So this is a sample program and something similar to what we use with our squads and with our regional or divisional S&C program. Okay, so we can pick exercises. So generally starting at our level 1 exercises that we have above. Okay, and they're kind of the first ones that we'll use and introduce to our players. For our warm-up, so I have it set up as a warm-up, a main circuit, and a finisher. Okay, so for our warm-up, we're using a lot of jumping and landing mechanics, which is our plyometrics, and I'll go through that again shortly. But you can also use some of the exercises that they're going to do as a warm-up. So for instance, in this circuit, they're doing squats. So it might be a case of doing 6 squats, doing 6 lunges, doing 6 glute bridge, and doing that 2 or 3 times as part of their warm-up. So the warm-up is movement. It's doing exercises that they're going to do in their circuit. Okay, it's just at a lot less of an intensity, and it's preparing them for those for the exercises in the main circuit. Okay, you could do that as well as the jumping and landing mechanics, which is our set position and our single leg set position. So there's a couple of options there for what you can do. For the main part of the exercises, so we work off kind of 6 to 8 exercises in this program here. You can see each one is going for 40 seconds. So you can do it for time. So they get as many reps as they can through that 40 seconds, or you can give it to them as a set amount of reps, so 10 to 12 reps. The thing with time is making sure that their technique is still really, really good. So it's not about exactly how many reps they can do, it's about how many quality reps they can do. So I might be getting, in 40 seconds, I might get 25 squats, but if I actually look at what my squats are, I might only be getting about halfway down in a squat, where I'm looking to get as close to the ground as possible. So if I am doing quality reps, that might only be 15, but I'd much rather that it was 15 quality reps than 25 half reps. Okay, so it's really trying to get that message to our players that we're looking for quality reps as opposed to just as many reps as possible. Okay, how then to progress that? So we can progress the time, we can increase the time that they have, we can increase the reps that we have, and then we can increase the level of exercise. So if we were to look at our squat, our first level would have been our split squat, and then after a few weeks, if we've used increasing reps, if we've used increasing time, and we're really happy with their technique, we can progress that squat, that split squat, onto a goblet squat. Okay, similar with the rest of our exercises. It might be a case that we're not happy with their lunges and we decide, okay, I'm not going to progress that exercise because I think we need a little bit more time to improve our technique before progressing on to the next level. But I can progress by increasing the number of reps or increasing the amount of time that they're doing the exercise for. Okay, hopefully that will make sense. The finisher part of the session then, so in this one we have mountain climbers, jumping jacks, and fast feet. So it's just really a case of getting more high intensity work in 20 seconds on each. So they're working for a minute. You can use any exercises. So mountain climbers, you could use burpees, whatever it is you like. Skipping, even if they had a skipping rope, you could add that in. And it's just giving them a little bit more high intensity to finish off. Not absolutely necessary. If they're getting in that main circuit and they're learning these movements, that's really what we're focused on. So how do we do these programs? Online sessions work well. We can also do these programs out on the pitch or in the gym. Again, in the gym, it doesn't really matter whether it's out on the pitch or in the gym. When our focus is completely on technique and learning the movement patterns, if we're not using any weight at that point. Okay, so with the online sessions, it is a little bit harder to spot and fix individually and really be able to coach each player through the exercise, but it's still effective for the time we're in. You know, hopefully we'll be back out on the pitch sooner rather than later, and that won't be too much of an issue. But it's, you know, it might be better to be able to do something with them than nothing. You can coach them using your cues and giving them good cues as they're doing the exercises and constantly reinforcing that. It just means it's a little bit harder to spot and fix each player. But there's two options there in terms of doing it online, whether that's through your Teams or Zoom or whatever format you use, and then when we're out on the pitch, being able to do it through our pitch session. And even if it's a case that it's, you know, you can give them a program like this that, you know, if they're doing it with you on the pitch, that, you know, they can repeat that another evening at home on their own. Okay, so that's our programs and how we can implement them through programs. We can also use exercise challenges. Okay, so using exercises to create a challenge for players. So it might be a case of giving them 1 or 2 challenges a week of exercises that they can work on for the week. This could be something that you use through homework. So during, you know, normal training sessions and training blocks, that we give them a couple of exercises to do at home on their own, and it's homework for them to do, or something that you can use now during lockdown to just give them something to focus on. We can create different challenges for the same exercises. We can also use the same challenges with different exercises. So what I mean by that is we can have an exercise. So let's take squats, for instance, and we can create different challenges from that one exercise. So one challenge might be to see how many squats with quality reps that they can do in 40 seconds. Another exercise challenge they could do would be to see how long they can hold at the bottom of their squat. So sitting down into the bottom as low as they can in their squat, and see how many seconds they can hold that for. Okay, so that's one movement pattern, but we can look at different challenges for that. We can also use those challenges for different exercises. So we can use for their push-ups, how many quality reps they can do for their push-ups. You know, that's something that we can do for a lot of different exercises. How many jumps they can get in a certain amount of time. Okay, so it's really about being creative with the exercises and with the challenge, and trying to get as much out of that as possible. Really, a really handy thing to be able to do then is to be able to send videos. So we have a lot of these challenges on our YouTube channel that you can use and send to players, but also if there's something that you come up with or something that you see on whatever social media platform, that you can use that video and send it to them and say, right, this is what I want you to do. This is the challenge for this week. Okay, and it gives them a little bit more information on what they're trying to do. And then we can challenge them to improve their score each day or each week. So if their challenge is to see how long they can sit at the bottom of their squat, then that might be something we ask them to do every second day and see how they improve their score. Or it might be that's your challenge for every Monday. Let's see how your score improves each week. Okay, so you can create a league table out of that if you wanted and have it as kind of a competition within your team. There's lots of different ways you can do that, but the basic exercise challenge is giving that to them and, you know, letting them record and compete against themselves, really. Okay, so I'm going to go through a couple of ones we have that we've used, and we'll see if there's something that you can use as well. Okay, so one of our challenges then is for a standing long jump. Okay, so a broad jump or standing long jump, whichever you want to call it. So if we have a look here, Limogue has 3 different markers. So all he's going to do is place down the first marker, and that's going to be his starting point. He's going to jump and stick his landing, okay, and he's going to hold his position there, and he's going to mark that distance, okay. He's then going to turn around and go again and see if he can beat that distance, okay. So he doesn't stick his landing, so he's going to try it again, and when he gets further, he can then mark his distance again. So he's changing the cones over to see how much further he's after jumping, okay. So this is one that they can use. You can ask them to mark their distance, to measure their distance and record it, and see themselves then their own progression, whether that's weekly or monthly or whatever it might be. But it's a nice and simple exercise to use that they can do at home, and they don't even need cones. They can use, you know, whether it's a water bottle or whatever they have at home, okay. Our second one then is, so this one is in a plank position. Okay, so we have Ross and Stephen here, and Stephen is changing the cones over and Ross is mirroring what he's doing. Okay, so every time Stephen flips a cone, Ross is going to do the same thing, trying to do it as quickly as he can. Okay, so we can progress that then. So Pat's going to take out the 3 cones here. So to make that a little bit more challenging, or to make it a different challenge, somebody's going to call a colour, and the boys have to react quickest to change that colour cone. Okay, so each time the colour is called, they're changing the cone to see who can do it quicker. So there's a couple of different ones there. This one's really, really good in terms of you can use a lot of different exercises for the same challenge. Okay, so the lads are doing it in a plank position, but we could also have that in the bottom of a squat. So we'll ask our players to do it sitting at the bottom of the squat. We could ask them to do it on single leg, and we can bring in our RDL so that they're hinging at their hips and bending over to change the cone each time. So there's different exercises that we can bring in to that same challenge. Okay, there is 2 players in it, so currently for lockdown, that might be a little bit harder, but most players will have somebody at home that they can do it with, or that can call the colour cone for them to change. So for our second one, when they're trying to react quickest, that can be something that can be done on their own as well. So all they need is somebody to call the coloured cone for them, and they flip it over. Okay, so there's a few options with that one. So there's a couple of challenges that you can use that will hopefully help our players through, whether it's our long jumps or whether it's our plank position or whatever exercise that you choose for those challenges, and hopefully it'll give you a few ideas that you can then change and develop to make other challenges. Okay. So from our exercise challenges, then we go into our warm-ups. Okay, so with our warm-ups, what are we trying to achieve? So what we're looking to do is raise our body temperature. Okay, so that's the raise part of our ramp warm-up. We're also looking to activate, so we're looking to get those different muscles engaged through different movement patterns. Okay, we're looking to mobilize, so again using those movement patterns that they're going to be using in a game. Okay, so we'll look at some jumping and landing mechanics, which is things that we can use, but also those movement patterns that they've done. So their squat, their lunges, they'll all get them mobilized and ready for the game. And then potentiate. Okay, so we're gradually increasing the stress on the body in preparation for the session or for the match. Okay, so that's what we're looking to do. How can we, within those warm-ups, whether it's game day or whether it's for our session, how can we put our exercises into those? Okay, so we're going to look at that and use our stretching for part of that. Okay, so instead of static stretching, we can use these movements as dynamic stretches or dynamic movements. Okay, so our static stretches is our stretches where we're standing still and holding a position for whatever it might be, 20 seconds, 12 seconds, 10 seconds. Okay, so that statics, holding our hamstring or stretching our quad or stretching our calves, where we're not actually getting any movement, it's been shown that that actually reduces power output. It reduces body temperature. So as we said, we're aiming to increase body temperature through our warm-up, but then we go into standing still and stretching, and it brings our body temperature back down. So we then have to re-increase that temperature before we go into our session, okay? Or else we're increasing it through our session, and it's taken a while for us to get engaged and get properly into the session, okay? And also we're using less sport-specific movement. So those movement patterns where I'm standing on one leg and I'm holding my shoelaces and stretching my quad, that's not a movement pattern where I'm going to see in a match or in a training session, okay? So what we can use then the dynamic stretches and movement for is basically doing the opposite to that. So there's no negative effect on power output, okay? It's going to maintain our body temperature. We're challenging ourselves more. We're moving constantly. It's more specific movements, so it's all movements that we will see during a game. So even our likes of our lunges, our split squats, they're similar movements to the things like running, to jumping. Our coordination improves and our strength improves as well. Okay, so by just using this and introducing it into our warm-up, we're going to see gains in our strength, especially if guys or girls haven't done this before. So they're going to improve coordination, improve balance, improve strength through doing it in this way. Okay, so what we're going to look at then is how we can actually put it into our session and have it integrated, so it's not just one thing or the other. Okay, so we can use warm-up games. So we're talking about the youth athlete, but we can use games just the same way we can with our child athlete, okay, or our child player. So our games like one-on-one bib tag, like back-to-back, like twister, any of those games, even tag, any different type of game that you might play with a child player, we can actually use them with our youth player, okay? The only difference that we might make is changing some of our language, okay? If it's a fun game and it's fun for children, more than likely it's fun for youth players and fun for adults, okay? So there's no problem with bringing those types of things in and incorporating that and having fun, and you know, especially at the start of our session, getting the session off to a good note. Okay, so I'm going to look at a couple of the games here that we can use. So the first one is Twister. Okay, so the same as the board game, where you're going to spread out different colored cones around, and you're going to use those as the color to call. Okay, then through that we can get our players moving in whatever movement pattern we like. So if that's a squat, if it's a lunge, if it's a leg swing, if it's skipping, if it's marching, whatever different movement patterns we want to use, okay, and that's how we can incorporate in our stretches and our dynamic movements as well. So we ask our players to move around the area using those different movements, and then the coach is going to call a colour and a body part. Okay, so it might be left foot red. Players have to find a red cone and touch it with their left foot, okay? Then they go back, we give them more movement patterns to do, and we go again. You can make different challenges, so it might be one person allowed at each cone, it might be two people allowed at each cone. Okay, you can put different conditions on the game, but it's giving them something fun to do and also getting them into the movement patterns that we're looking to do for their warm-up. Okay, so that's one game. Back-to-back is similar in that instead of calling a colour cone, you might just shout back-to-back and they have to find a partner and stand with their backs together. You might shout shoulder to shoulder and they have to stand with their shoulders together. Okay, but you're still incorporating those movements through the game, so that it's not a stop and start type of thing. Okay, the movements, patterns, and the strength exercises that they're doing are part of the program, are part of the game. Okay, one-on-one bib tag is another one. This is also really good for actually teaching athletic stance, which I'll go through with you in a minute. So where the other two games, the stretches are a lot more integrated with one-on-one bib tag and with some other games, you can stop the game. So if they're playing one-on-one bib tag, two players are playing against each other. They have the bib tucked into their tracksuit or into their shorts, and they're trying to steal each other's bib. Okay, so if they get the bib, they can give it back and continue to play. You get a point for every time that you take the bib. Okay, within this, it might be a case of let them play for 90 seconds, 2 minutes, then stop the game, go through a few movement patterns. So you might do 8 to 10 squats, you might do 8 to 10 lunges, and you might do leg swings, 6 to 8 leg swings on each side. Okay, then back into the game again, challenge them to see if they can score more points, give them another couple of minutes, stop, go through a few more movement patterns, and keep repeating that until you've got through your full warm up of playing the game, and also getting through the movement patterns and the strength movements that you want to get through. Okay, again, that can be done with skills as well. So if you want to integrate your skills into your warm up, it can be done in the exact same way. So you might set your players up in groups of 3s or groups of 4s, let them find a spot on the pitch, work whatever skill it is you want to work on. So we might be working on the hand pass. They have to do 10 to 15 hand passes on each side, bring them in, go through your few movement patterns, and back out for the next piece of skill work. If it's kicking, whatever it is, whatever skill development you want to do, it's a nice way to be able to integrate that. Let them work on a skill, come back in, they go through a few stretches. You can be given coaching cues on your skill work and direction for when they go back out into the next skill while they're doing the movement patterns, and they'll pick them up pretty quickly and get, be in a routine of what you're doing. There's a couple of other games there as well that you can have a look at, but really the idea is that you can use any kind of fun game and integrate the stretches and the movement patterns into those, while giving them something fun to do, and also getting in the movements and the warm-up that you need to get into. So all of those different games that they can play, they're going to be doing different movement patterns in terms of twisting and turning, in terms of being quick on their feet, and increasing their body temperature and their heart rate through moving in those exercises. Okay, so what I'll look at is we'll take a quick look at one-on-one bib tag. Okay, so we're going to go through one-on-one bib tag. So we've 2 different games going on here. So we've Ross and Stephen playing against each other in the back, and in the front here we've Lee Moog and Aaron playing against each other. So the lads are trying to steal each other's bib, okay, and they get a point for each time they get a bib, and then they give it back and they continue to go. So they're moving. So perfect game for a warm-up. They're getting lots of different movements in. They're going to be raising their body temperature, and they're also enjoying it, okay. Once you give them a bit of time to play, stop it, okay, bring them in, let them do some movement patterns, and then send them back out to the game. So for this game in particular, it's also a really good way to coach athletic stance, okay. So what you'll get kind of initially with playing this game is players will stand quite tall. So when you bring them in and you talk to them, you can start asking them questions about how their stance is going to help them. So if we move back a little bit in the video, what you'll be able to see, so what we're looking for, if you look at Ross here in the back, okay, he's quite a wide stance. He's a bend in his knees, a bend in his hips, and his chest is up, okay. So if you look at him as he's moving, he's able to move quite quickly, and he's able to move from side to side, okay. So he's able to defend the bib he's on and also try and attack and grab Stephen's bib, okay. So by asking them questions, asking them, if their feet should be narrow, if their feet should be wide, why that's going to help when their feet are wide, if they're going to get more balance from that, and then ask them to go back out and change and play the game in that position. So a slight bend in their hips, a slight bend in their knees, but they're keeping their head and chest up. When they come back in for their stretches, you can ask them if that was, if they found that any easier, any harder, and then how they can relate that to a game. So how is that position going to help them in a match situation? And how, if a player is running at them, if they're defending, if being in that position is going to help them to move better and to be able to defend better. Okay, so just a little thing that we can use also the warm-up game to be able to coach for situations that might happen on the field. Okay, so into our next slide then. Okay, so integrating exercises into our warm-up. So be creative with the games, okay? So we can use the same game in plenty of different ways, okay? So that goes back to our step, which we learn in our foundation course and our Ward 1 course, okay? You changing different things within the game, whether it's space, whether it's time, whether it's equipment, or whether it's personnel, okay? So that bib tag game, that could be one-on-one, it could be 2 players on, it could be everyone on, it could be 3-on-2. There's loads of different ways we can use that game. So don't be kind of caught up in not having enough games. Change the games you have and try and develop them and be creative with them. Fun games are fun games for all ages. So those games that you might see being played with our child player, we can use them just as well with our youth player. It might just be a case of changing the language, okay? And try not to make exercises or our movement patterns a punishment. So with some games that we play, it might be a case of, you know, a player is out if they get caught. Don't make the exercise a punishment. So we can use exercises to allow them back in the game, but our language is really important. So it's a case of not encouraging them to believe that, you know, that exercise is a punishment and then you can get back into the game, but change our language slightly. So, okay, if you give me 10 push-ups, that'll be a token back into the game, okay, or that'll be a ticket back into the game. So it's just looking at our language and making sure that they have a positive association with the exercises, so that, you know, they're more likely and more happy to do them, and also that it's something they have a positive association with for the rest of their life as well. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our kind of strength component. What we're going to look at then is our plyometrics. Okay, so with our plyometrics, what we're looking at is jumping and landing basically. So we're going to look at landing mechanics. Then we progress that on to jumping mechanics and adding in our landing, and then getting strong and powerful within those movements. Okay, so our technique again is really, really important. So we're learning landing mechanics and we're learning jumping mechanics, and we're gaining balance, we're gaining stability and control through our movements. We're improving our force production and improving our force absorption. Okay, so our force production comes through our jumping and our absorption comes through our landing. We're hopefully reducing the risk of injuries, and we're also again increasing more robustness in our players. Okay, so if you've ever done a skydive, you'll know that they spend an awful lot of time looking at landing. Okay, so you might think, why are we bothered with landing? But this is actually where a lot of our injuries happen. Okay, so we need to spend more time focusing on learning how to land, and then add in our jump component. But making sure that we can land properly will hopefully reduce the risk of injuries. So with our female players, they're 6 times more likely to suffer from ACL injuries than our male players. And if we do suffer an ACL injury once, we're more likely to suffer again. Okay, so if we can teach a lot of these injuries, both ACL and other injuries tend to happen when we land, and we land awkwardly, whether we twist our knee or we twist our ankle. If we land with our, with our toe pointing out one way and our knee dropping in, that tends to be where those injuries happen. So if we can really practice and learn how to land properly and get strong in that movement pattern, then hopefully we can reduce the risk of those injuries occurring. Okay, so what I'm going to go through is how to do that. So we'll look at our set position, which is our landing. Okay, so we'll look at that both with 2 feet and also single leg, and we'll increase that up to a triple extension position, so basically going up onto our tippy toes and just doing our landing from there. Again, still focused on our landing, and then we'll increase and add in our jumps, so that we're still focusing on our landing, but we're adding our jumps into it, and then we can start to progress our jumps through trying to get as much height as we can or trying to get as much distance as we can. So our first set position is our two-footed landing. Okay, so what we're looking at, bring it back to the start. What we're looking at here is, so we start standing up, okay, so feet are about shoulder width apart, our hands are by our sides, and our focus is forward. The way I work this is I call set for my players, and then they go into the landing position. So if you watch Keane here, he takes a slight jump, okay, and his feet come out a little bit. So his feet start closer in, he jumps slightly out. He drops down, so he's a soft bend in his knees, a soft bend in his hips, and his head and chest are up. So it's very similar to the athletic position we were looking at in our one-on-one bib tag. Okay, so he's landing then, keeping those knees nice and soft, those hips nice and soft, and his focus is forward. His hands then are going towards his back pocket. Okay, and that is literally it. So he can step back up and step back in. Okay, so he'll come back into that start position, and then you'll call set again, and they'll go again. Okay, so it's very, very simple. All we're looking to do is make sure that that landing is nice and soft. We're absorbing the force. So what you might hear, especially if you're on a hard ground, is players making as much noise as they can with the landing. And what we're trying to encourage is that that's as quiet as possible, so that they're trying to make sure that that landing is really soft. Okay, the real focus is then that we have a bend in our knees, a bend in our hips, our chest is up, okay, our focus is forward, and our hands are down at our back pockets. Okay, this then progresses into our triple extension. Okay, so to progress with our two-footed landing, okay, we're going to go into a triple extension position. So instead of starting in this standing position, okay, we go up onto our tippy toes with our hands overhead. Okay, so our triple extension then is the extension here at the ankle joint, the extension at the knee joint, and the extension at the hip, okay? Hands are straight up overhead, but we're still landing in the exact same position. Okay, so when I call set, players will drop down, okay, and they're landing back in that position that we've already looked at. Okay, so the bend in the knees, bend in the hips, the head and chest are up, and the hands are going towards our back pockets. Okay, so again, it's very simple. Okay, they step back up and they'll go back through the exercise again. Okay, so back up into that high position, up on their tippy toes. When you call set, they're dropping down into that position. Okay, and that's the position that we're going to be looking for them to land in when we start adding in jumps. Okay, to look then also at our single leg position. Okay, so this is the same in that we're starting on 2 feet. Okay, so the exact same starting position. We're starting on 2 feet. We're going to have our hands up overhead, and we're going to drop down and land on 1 foot. Okay, so with this, the same cues kind of come in. So we have that bend in the knee, bend in the hips, and the head and chest are up. Okay, but because it's single leg, the non-standing leg is going to go out behind us. The hands are going to change slightly. So Keane lands here on his left leg, so his left hand is going to go back to his back pocket, but the opposite hand is going to come up, and his hand is coming up towards his cheek. Okay, so one hand to the back pocket, one hand to the cheek, and that's almost then going into our running mechanics. Okay, so he's in the position then to take a step into his stride. Okay, so for our single leg, we're going through exactly the same thing. We're just landing on 1 foot instead of 2. Okay, so our first one was our normal set position. So he's standing like in this position here. He's going to take a slight jump and land in that single leg set position. And then we progress that onto the triple extension, where he starts up on his tippy toes, hands overhead, and on set, he's landing in that set position. Okay, then we can add in our jumps. So again, when we add in our jumps, we are still focused on our landing. So we're not worried about how much height he's getting on his jump. We're worried about how well we can stick that landing and how well our position is. Okay, so he jumps explodes up, and then lands back in that set position. So I'll go through that one again. Explodes up and lands there in that set position. So that's exactly what we're looking for: a bend in the knees, a bend in the hips, chest up, and hands at the back pockets. Okay, if you notice his feet as well, his feet are pointing straight ahead. Okay, so everything is nice and in line, and then he steps back up and is ready to go again. Okay, so until they're really strong in their landing with the jump in it, don't worry and don't let them focus too much on how much height they're getting. Okay, once they get good on it, then we can start encouraging them to get higher into their jump while still maintaining that really strong landing mechanics. Okay, we go then into a single leg. So again, back to landing on one foot. Okay, the difference being that we start on one foot as well here. Okay, so we're starting on one foot. We're dropping down, getting as high as we can, and landing then in that set position. Okay, so Keane lands here. So he has that a nice straight line down here. So all here is nice and straight. Okay, he has a bend in his knee, a bend in his hips, his chest is up. Okay, remember that opposite leg and opposite hand. So if he's landed on this foot, this hand here should be coming up to his cheek. Okay, and his hand on the same side should be going to his back pocket. Okay, he's holding that for a second and then standing back up and ready to go again. Okay, we progress that then. So we have our vertical jumps, and then we can go into our horizontal jumps. So for our horizontal jumps, again, it pretty much stays the same. We're not too focused on the distance that he's getting. We're focused on that landing. Okay, so when he lands, he's sticking his landing. So he's not falling over. He's not jumping around. Okay, if they're jumping too far, then they're going to be kind of losing their balance. Okay, so we'll ask them to not jump as far so that we can make sure that they're really getting that set position, and then we can start to challenge them by pushing their distance. Okay, so he's sticking his landing. He's getting a bend in his knees, a bend in his hips. His hands are at his back pockets and his chest is up. Okay, so exact same landing position for each jump. Okay, the landing position itself isn't changing. It's just the jumps that we're increasing the direction or changing the direction. Okay, and then we'll add that in, that broad jump, into single leg. Okay, so he starts on one foot, explodes forward, and he's sticking his landing. So particularly with this one, you'll find that they're hobbling around and not sticking their landing straight away. So again, it's not about the distance. It's about making sure that they can hold that position and that their landing is, so we're hitting all those things in that landing position. Okay, so bend in the knee, a bend in the hips. Okay, Keane could be slightly higher here, but that's okay. We're coaching them through that. Okay, so when his knee is up, his opposite hand is up. So this hand is up perfectly at his cheek. Hand on his opposite side will be towards his back pocket. Okay, and that he's holding that position, coming up, and then we're going again. So what we're looking for really is a soft bend in the knees, a soft bend in the hips, and their head and chest is up. Okay, we're looking for a quiet landing, so for them not to make too much noise when they land, because we're trying to absorb that force, and the louder that they land, the more force is going to go through their joints. Okay, and we're just looking for control. Okay, once we have those things, we can start increasing the distance, increasing the height of the jump, and changing the jumps around as well. Okay, so these are really kind of basic movements, but they're really simple to add into your sessions. So I would have these in all of my sessions. They usually come in after the warm-up. So we go through our movement patterns in the warm-up, we go through our game, whatever that might be, and then we go straight into our jumping and landing mechanics. So we can start off with our set positions. So it might be just our normal set position and our single leg set position. Work off 6 reps. So 6 reps of set position on 2 feet, 6 reps on single leg, so 3 each side, and do maybe 2 rounds of that. Okay. Then once they get strong at that, we can add in our triple extension. So they're up on their tippy toes. Okay, so then we 4 exercises that they're going through. Again, 6 repetitions for each. If they're single leg, it's 3 each side, and go through 2 rounds. And then once they've got good at those, we can, after a few sessions or a few weeks, we can add in the jumps. Okay. I would try and keep the set positions always in there. So even as you progress through different jumps, still keep that set position in there. So you're reinforcing the importance of the landing and you're just reinforcing the technique each time. Okay. And that brings us to the end of our session. So there has been a good few questions that have come in. So I'm going to go through some of them just before we finish off. Okay, so there was quite a lot of questions around differences between boys and girls. So is there a difference between how we train boys to how we train girls when it comes to strength and conditioning? Really, there isn't. So we can use the exact same exercises, the exact same movement patterns, jumping and landing, all of that stuff will be exactly the same regardless of whether we're training boys or girls. What does kind of come more into play with girls is there's definitely an increased risk in ACL injuries, which we mentioned before. So our jumping and landing mechanics can become a little bit more important, but I would have it as much as a priority with boys as it is for girls, in that I'd have both doing it. So with our female players, making sure that they can land properly. Again, our strength work comes into that. So if we're getting them strong and the types of movement patterns that we're going through, so our squats, our lunges, our hip hinge, our RDLs, if we're getting them stronger in those movement patterns, then we're strengthening their joints, we're strengthening their knees, they're getting physically stronger, then they should, that should create more robust players and hopefully reduce the risk of injuries. But really overall, it's not going to change between coaching boys and girls. Another question that was coming up a lot is what exercises are suitable at a given age and when can I introduce weights? So really those exercises that we've gone through are suitable at any age. So for me, it should always be a part of our training. So we should be, our players should be looking and doing allow development from as soon as they start training. So that's from nursery right the way up. The only thing is it's going to look slightly different. So I'm not going to have my 6-year-olds or my 8-year-olds doing a full program, but the movement patterns are going to be included and they're going to be done throughout our sessions, okay? But they're going to be done in a different way. So I will use a lot of movement patterns, a lot of animal movements, to have our players doing those types of movements. So they might be doing a bear crawl, they might be walking like a duck, to include their squat movement in. They might be taking giant steps to bring in our lunge. Okay, so it starts really when they start training at nursery level, and it's just progressed and put into our sessions in different ways as they get older. In terms of weights, this is more to do with training age than their actual age. So what I mean by that, so they might be 12 years old and have never done S&C before, or they might be 14 years old and never have done S&C before. So they're still going to start at the same point if they've not done it. So when we introduce weights is when they have had training over a certain number of years and they have become good at those movement patterns and they've done enough training to be able to then take that load. So it's not necessarily a specific time or a specific age. It's more about their technique and when they're capable to be able to take those loads, having done enough training before that. How can I integrate S&C and skills into my session? So hopefully you'll have taken something from this workshop that will give you some information on that in terms of getting it in through your warm-ups, even bringing those programs in. But really through our warm-ups we can get S&C in and add that skills component as well, so you're getting both of them through the session without it being totally split. The best time of year, so this came up a few times as well for strength and conditioning. Really for me, strength and conditioning should be throughout the year. So it usually comes up quite a lot and becomes more prominent in our pre-season time. But really, it's something that should be continuous throughout the year. So no more than starting strength and conditioning at an early age, but not necessarily it being about doing squats and lunges, but doing different movement patterns and framing them in a way that is child friendly. It should also be done throughout the year. So not necessarily one time a year for certain things, just trying to integrate that into the session and having it a part of the session throughout your year. How can I include injury prevention into my session? So when it comes to injury prevention, we probably can't really prevent injuries, but we can definitely reduce the risk of them. And I think really that comes from doing good training and doing our athletic development or our S&C in the right way. Okay, so if we're doing our programs, if we're doing those exercises and those movement patterns and incorporating them into our session, we're doing our jumping and landing mechanics, that's all adding to reducing our risk of injury. And it doesn't need to be something completely specific to injury prevention or reducing the risk of injury. It's just good training and doing that consistently throughout the year. What are some courses that I can do? So there's plenty of courses around in strength and conditioning. We have a level 1 course in Connacht GAA, which you need the award-winning coaching course to be done to be able to get into it. But it's an excellent course, and we've actually just finished completing the level 2 part, so that'll be coming up soon as well. But there's others around the country as well. I know Leinster do a resistance training course. If you're around there or if you're near Leinster, there is also, there's different ones with different sports. I know the IRFU do a conditioning type of S&C course. Setanta College have a lot of different S&C courses. Really, if you're doing S&C, it can be with any sport, because it's transferable from sport to sport. And finally, just finishing off with some resources. So these are people and accounts that I would follow, and I've got a lot of good resources, good ideas from. So the first few there are kind of fitness based and exercise based. And then on the other side, the Connacht, particularly the Connacht Instagram, has a lot of drills and games that were done on tactical pad that are up on their Instagram, which are a really good resource. There was also a few questions that came in about nutrition that I didn't go through. So if you're interested in that side, I have our nutritionist with Sligo GAA, Aoife and Emma, their accounts are there, and also Davy Nutrition. You'll get loads of information from them. So thank you very much for tuning in and listening to the session. Hopefully you'll have got some practical applications that you can take to your training sessions, be it during lockdown or when we're back on the field, and get something out of it. To those of you that have registered, I'll send out the PowerPoint to you. And if you weren't registered but are interested in the PowerPoint, just send me an email and I can forward it on. And thank you very, very much.